Welcome back to the Sure Parenting Podcast. I'm so excited to be able to interview another amazing mama today. This is Tracie. We have known each other for a hot minute. And today we are going to talk specifically about homeschooling the neuro-spicy child and all that can be included in that journey. We have some similarities. We've got some differences. I think it's going to be a great conversation. Tracie, could you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Tracie. I am from New York State. Sammy and I have known each other, like she said, for a while. We met on a retreat in, I think, Arizona or
I think
somewhere.
so,
I don't even
yeah.
know. It's so strange how you find friends in this world. It's just amazing that we have that ability to travel around and meet people from so many different places because we had such a connection. So I am a mom of four sons. My husband and I have four boys together, and my youngest I am homeschooling. He is neuro-spicy, and we started homeschooling 5 years ago. My older kids, I wanted to homeschool, but my husband was not on board with that at the time. All of them are adults now and far done with school. So Roman is in ninth grade, just finished ninth grade, and we've been homeschooling, like I said, for 5 years, and it's going well. I'm glad we're doing it. I'm not going to say there's no challenges to it, but it's a better situation. It fits our family. It fits his learning style best. My husband and I are also business owners, so we stay busy. That is what we do.
Yes,
We stay
definitely
busy.
you do.
Yeah.
So I think that it's cool how you just introduced that, because there was a part of you that always liked the idea of homeschooling. But initially, your kiddos were the types of kiddos that were doing all right. I know you had to do some advocacy for them in their public school, some of them, and you were up to that challenge. Awesome. You're welcome to discuss that a little bit. But what I would love to do is kind of highlight that turning point where you were able to realize, yeah, but see, this isn't actually working anymore. This child needs something different.
Yeah, that is so. The way that came about is really it's a silver lining to COVID, to that whole
Mm.
world shutdown. Actually, we had been struggling with Roman in public school. He has learning disabilities. He also has some other, like, behavioral um, disabilities, I guess. And so we were struggling to find the right fit for him as far as a classroom. He was in a lot of self-contained classrooms for most of the time that he was in public school. I had advocated for him when his behaviors became less volatile. The rules state that a child is to be educated in the least restrictive environment. That's what the public schools are supposed to provide.
Mhm.
So we advocated for my son to be taken out of that self-contained classroom and put into a integrated classroom. So some of the children in his class were neurodivergent, had some special needs, and the rest of the class was typical
Mhm.
average kids. So there were multiple teachers in the room because of that, and my son was given an aide, um, which was the least restrictive setting for him. He needed that extra help academically, but he also needed to be able to connect socially with more peers
Yeah.
and be given that freedom, because he didn't need the restriction for the behavioral issues as much anymore. But
Mhm.
then, so we were in that setting, and then COVID happened and they shut everything down. And what we had already been doing was on the side. I had signed up for a website called Time for Learning, which was a little subscription fee that I was paying. I want to say it was like $15 or $20 a month, something like that. And it had full curriculum in there, but I wasn't using it for that. I was using it as a supplement because one of Roman's disabilities is that he doesn't hold on to things well. His working memory struggles. So sometimes he would learn something and if he didn't revisit it daily, he could forget it, like over the weekend or over a summer break or a 2 week, a holiday vacation, he would forget much of what he had learned. So I had been using this online curriculum just to keep him um, in keep his status quo until he got back in the classroom and revisited that subject so that he would maintain more of it. So I already had that on the back burner when they stopped. They just stopped. They told kids to stay home and no school. There was no plan by the district to educate, and I knew if he's off for several weeks or
Mhm.
longer from school, he is going to lose everything that he learned. So we started doing time for learning every day, just for maybe 20, 30 minutes a day, just to kind of keep him up on some of those skills. So when they went back to school, they were doing it online, and they were not changing the lesson plan for the kids who learn differently. So basically his integrated classroom was all getting one set of tasks,
Mhm.
and they were all online. They were all on the computer. And Roman does not learn the best that way. He is
Mhm.
much more kinesthetic. He needs that hands-on experience. So sitting and staring at a screen and having to, punch numbers in or type into the screen is just not his best way for him to learn.
Right.
So and he was getting really frustrated being unable to keep up with what they were giving him because it was for the mainstream kiddos. It
Mhm.
wasn't, like I said, there was no separate plan for those kids that learn differently. So I reached out at that time to his teachers and I said, is it okay if I use what I'm doing with him at home on Time for Learning instead of what you were sending that he is struggling so badly with? And they said, yeah, if you can report to us what you're doing with him, um, we'll accept that. So
Nice.
so I did that. He had great teachers. I want to emphasize how much his teachers really did care about him, and I really did like our school district. Um, but uh, he just didn't learn well in that environment. So when it came to the end of the school year, and they were still on computers, they told Roman, and they did like an exit interview with each kid, like a Zoom, and they said, your mom wins the prize for best homeschooling parent during this time where everybody has to homeschool. They're like, Roman, it's so awesome that your mom was able to help you like that. You guys did so great. She did better than all the other parents at keeping you on track and all this stuff. And so that was sort of showing my husband, like, see, I told you I can do this. Like, I've wanted to homeschool for years, and like, we can do this. And so then I kind of waited to see what was going to happen. And when they were talking about going back hybrid in the fall, but kids were going to have to be masked, I knew with Roman's um, social difficulties that seeing people masked all day or trying to learn language when you have a speech language delay from a teacher who's this is all you can see of their face, so you can't see them pronouncing the words and
Mhm.
articulating. I knew that was never going to work. So that's when I said, that's it. We are doing this. We are switching to full on homeschooling. So that was in fifth grade. Midway through fifth grade is when we started. The pandemic started, and so sixth, seventh, eighth, and ninth so far we have fully homeschooled.
That's amazing. And I think that, sometimes, like you said, it's like the silver lining. Sometimes it's unexpected, our journey
Mm-hmm.
to homeschooling. Um, I think, okay, so was a public school teacher
Mm-hmm.
and had every intention of, I was pregnant and I was like, okay, well, I'll have my baby and then I'll stay home for a little while and then I'll go back to teaching. Well, my child had different ideas. There were like lots of needs, all
Yeah.
of the high needs baby stuff. And I couldn't go back the way I had thought. And then as he was accommodating acclimating to the world and kind of overcoming some of the most difficult challenges he had as an infant, I got pregnant again. And my oldest two are just 18 months apart, 19 months apart, really, really close. And so when that all happened, now I have like 2 little people who need me. And my
Mhm.
boss was like, "Okay, but are you coming back? Are you coming back?" I'm like, "Not really. I don't think so." Even years later, I ran into him and he was like, "When are you coming back?" I'm like, with my 2 and 3-year-old, I was like, "I don't think
Mm,
that will be happening." Um,
yeah.
but I was able to find this incredible play-based, parent cooperative preschool type situation for them where they could go, our yard at the time was just like this little patch of rocks. And this co-op, it's in Las Vegas. It's called the Kids Co-op. It's highly recommend anybody who's looking. But they were very child-centered and very focused on letting them explore in like all of the ways. You mentioned kinesthetic learning. Like these kids had a mud pit and they could climb trees, and there was just so much that they could do that they couldn't do at home. So I really liked that environment for them. And then the Vegas school district went from having half-day options, which was my plan with my oldest, to only full day. And I was like, okay, well, this particular Neuro-spicy child is not going to do well with like a 7 or 8 hour day. That's not
Mm-mm.
going to happen.
Mm-mm.
And what I ended up doing, his birthday is in August, and so he was going to have to start kindergarten as a 4-year-old.
Oh.
And I was like, yeah, I don't love that. And so I wanted to give him an extra year or hold him back, as my husband said. And he was like really worried about that. Now, I was the oldest in my grade, and my husband was the youngest in his grade. So we have different perspectives, and we kind of experienced school a little different. My whole senior year from September on, I was 18. I signed my own notes. I would walk in and be like, "Do we have any absences?" And they're like, "Yeah, you missed, you left early last Tuesday." And I'm like, "Okay." And I pull out a piece of paper and write a note and hand it to her. And she's like, "This is weird." I'm like, "I'm
That
18."
is
She's like, "I know, we don't advertise that you can do that." I'm like, "That's fine. I don't need to tell people." But like, that's how it was. So like my experience was so different. And not in a bad way to me. But my husband's experience wasn't bad for him either. He didn't mind being the youngest. But what we had to do was look at the kid in front of us. And this child was not, for lots of reasons, ready for that transition. So he actually did, he stayed another year in that play-based preschool, and it was so good for him. The amount of growth he got in that extra year was tremendous. And then shortly after that, Harvard, I think it was, came out with this whole article about the benefits of redshirting a kid or giving them that extra year. And I felt like, yeah, that's what I thought. I had that little moment. But even my husband was able to see how much that had benefited him. And so
Mhm.
I ended up teaching at that early childhood center, and just really enjoyed that place. And then we moved to another state. So we moved up to Idaho from Nevada. And at that point, we had the option to obviously enroll them. And we were really strongly looking at just homeschooling. Like we had been doing things in conjunction because the play-based cooperative was 3 days a week. So during the other days, we were doing stuff at home and really enjoying it and helping them develop what they wanted to be interested in, doing kind of nature study, stuff like that. And I just really enjoyed it.
Mhm.
And I saw that letting them learn in the way that felt most natural for them really was able to circumvent some of the anxiety or the pressure, the stress that their neurotypes would put on themselves.
Mhm.
So when we moved, I was pregnant with my third, and I was like, we're just going to homeschool. And at the time, I think I was still doing like, okay, we'll homeschool this year and see how it goes.
Right.
And then COVID happened. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful that they're not sitting on a computer screen 6 hours a day. They don't have the brains for that type of learning at all.
Mm-mm.
I'm so grateful that their world really, it was certainly affected when you go out and everybody is in this like panicked energy. My son could feel that. That was really distressing for him. But their day to day wasn't that different,
Mhm.
And so I really valued and appreciated that for that time for that one piece, that it solidified that sense of, we can homeschool and we can really help these kiddos pursue their education in a way that allows them to thrive. And we found an incredible co-op to join here, great families that were all, in that space of, follow the child and help them to find and achieve their goals. And each kid is different, and so they've been such a great resource for me, because I also tend towards a little bit of anxiety, and to have, seasoned homeschoolers that are like, hey, he's doing great. Like, take a deep breath. And then, 3 months later, he's got that thing that I was worried about. And I'm like, oh, they were right. Okay. I get those little reminders. And I think sometimes you have the kind of kiddos that you just know, that their type of learning, like, sure, could they survive? Could they go sit in a classroom? Of course they could. Could they even have some sort of benefit from that? Maybe. But the way they learn isn't conducive to going and sitting in a desk and being still and focusing on the teacher at the front of the room, copying things off the board. Like, those things aren't where they thrive. They thrive in the projects and the rabbit trails and being able to listen to a read aloud. We were reading 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea as part of our marine biology unit. And then that gears really well into geography. As he's moving around, it's like talking about these different countries. And then what's so neat about that is it's actually using country names that don't exist anymore. So then you're looking at old maps and you're talking about, politics and how things change. And there was just so much that we got that started, by reading a book. Like, that's the basics, right? But then it explodes into all these areas. And that experience is so joyful with them. And I actually don't think that every single child should homeschool or every single parent should homeschool. I actually don't think that. But I think that when you have that internal knowing as a mother that this isn't working for my child, and the only reason you're not, like, homeschool would be better for them. You know that this is what you want to do with your family, but you're afraid that it'll be too hard. That's where I want to come in and, like, give you a hug and be like, hey, there is a way to do this.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I would love for you to take back over. You live in, like, a really restrictive state. So can you tell us a little bit about that and about how you've been able to do this within the restrictions that your state has?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So I am in New York State. It is the most restrictive, most regulated state in America. We tend to go back and forth between New York and California that they're trying to win the prize as the most restrictive and highest taxed. Why? I don't know. I don't know what prize they think they're getting, but that's where we are. And we are here. And people have said, well, why don't you move, like, to get those freedoms? And well, we own a business. It's going into third generation now. My son and his wife are going to be the next owners of our company within a few years. And so, we are here, and that is it for the foreseeable future. So we are in a highly, highly restricted state. And this is something I want parents to know who are considering homeschooling, but are worried about, how am I going to fit it in? I work. I have all these other commitments. I'm not a teacher. How could I possibly do this? I am here to tell you, from living in the most regulated state in America, it is doable. It is much more doable than you think it is. It can seem intimidating when you start, of course, because everything new is intimidating when we don't know what we don't know. The beauty of the time that we live in is you have online communities. Facebook has, I'm in like 4 different homeschooling groups specific to my state, even to Western New York where I live, the Buffalo side. So go Bills. So gotta get
mandatory go Bills. Got it.
Gotta get it in. So there's so many groups that there's so many experienced parents in there that will help you get off the ground when you're first starting out. Some really important things to know, that even in the most regulated state, we still have massive freedom how we teach, what we teach, when we teach it. So For example, we are now in high school. So they give a regulation for high school of a certain number of credits that we have to complete. Like we have to do 4 English units and 2 math units, and there's all these various units throughout the 4 years of high school. So we can space those out in any way that we want. Also, within each subject, we can pick what we learn. My son spent a year or two absolutely obsessed with rocks. Loves rocks, crystals, going to find them in the woods, in creek beds. Right. Yeah, exactly.
We're buddies.
Mine's in front. I have a shelf right above me here that has not as many as you, but yeah. So we thankfully live in a rural kind of area. We're right outside of, we're within 15-20 minutes of the city of Buffalo, but we're in a pretty rural area. So we have creek beds and hills to climb and trees and all of that. And so there are plenty of times that we took our science lesson outside and we found and named different plants. And there's apps you can get on your phone that'll tell you, can point it at the plant, take a picture of it, it'll tell you what it is, and we can learn about that. So there's so many, you're not held to, you have to purchase a curriculum and ride this curriculum all the way through from beginning to end. You don't. People do that for my sister-in-law homeschools that way. She uses BJU and that's what she uses. And great, that works for her family. My child being Neuro-spicy, we cannot just do one curriculum. We end up usually changing what we're learning or how we're learning it 2 or 3 times per school year. Yeah. We're still learning science, or we're still learning history, or we're still learning reading and vocabulary, but we are switching up the books that we're using, or sometimes switching to some online learning here and there. It's not his favorite way to learn, but sometimes a video is something he really, if he wants to delve into something, sometimes he likes that. We take our lessons on the road. Like there's a rock and gem show every year at our fairgrounds. That's a school day, and that's a field trip I get to put on my reporting, right? And he's learning from geologists and people who actually study all these rocks. And there's classes at the Rock and Gem Show. You can go in to the side rooms and they'll have somebody teaching about we learned about rocks specific to our area of New York and what can be found. So when he's hiking around the woods, he knows when he's found one. So a homeschool doesn't have to look like, and in fact, I don't believe it should look like a public school classroom.
I agree.
It doesn't have to mirror that at all, especially if we are talking about neurodivergent kids. We already know, and frankly, I have 4 boys. 3 of them were in the average range, typical kids. There were some minor issues that they struggled with, but they were able to keep up pretty well. Most kids don't learn best by sitting in a classroom for 6 hours a day. That's just not what kids are built for, right? So you think if your average child struggles to sit, especially boys, to sit still and listen to a teacher talk to them and write on a paper all day, if most boys already are not built for that, then a neurotypical or neurodivergent boy is going to have exponentially more difficult issues going on, right? So being able to switch it up, and that's something I'm an upholder. Sammy knows this about me. I'm an upholder. You give me a rule, you give me a curriculum, you give me a book, and you say do this, and I'm going to do it. So I'm the one that has to learn to be more flexible, because my son is going to switch it up. He can say he loves a subject and he'll love it for a few weeks, and then he's like, I don't want to learn that anymore. I don't want to learn that kind of math. I need to learn reading, but not that kind of reading. So we're constantly having to pivot, and that's okay. And how I know it's okay is in New York State, we are required for all 4 years of high school to do outside end of year assessment testing. Before that, beginning in 4th grade through 8th grade, you have to do assessment tests every other year, and you can just do a written narrative on their progress in the intervening years. Once you get to 9th grade, it's every year. you have to pass, and it's an outside source that we get the test from. It's untimed. It's called the CAT test, the California Achievement Test. And it's an online test. My son has an IEP, so I'm able to read the questions to him. The test is untimed. So he has some concessions for testing, but he did so well on this test that both of us were stunned because he struggles. He has such a hard time getting going with learning. He struggles when he feels like he doesn't know something, and it ramps up his anxiety, and then learning is much more difficult when we're in an anxious state, right? So the good news is that even though we have pivoted curriculum countless times, we have switched up the style of learning, we have switched up whether we learn in a classroom or outside, or we've done a little bit of road schooling. We travel a lot. It's great to not be restricted to a school schedule. I have family all over the place, and we go to Atlanta, or we'll go to the DC Baltimore area to visit family, and there's always some museums, and there's like Civil War. Oh my gosh, Atlanta is full of stuff if you want to learn about US history, and that is learning, right? So we've done math lessons in the kitchen by cutting tortillas into wedges and making fractions and, things like that, so that you can be so creative with it and know that they're still learning, because they're learning in the way they learn best. I feel like it sticks better.
Yeah.
And so then when we test him, we are pleasantly surprised to find out that he scored above average. And this is a child who, when I pulled him home in 5th grade, was reading at a 1st grade level. And now we're doing 9th grade stuff, and he is testing out to be above 9th grade level in almost everything. So it's incredible when you allow your child-led. I try to follow an unschool model. It's next to impossible in New York because the regulations are just there, and I have to follow them. So I unschool it as much as I can. And one other thing real quick, it doesn't have to be a 6-hour day. And this is what I think people get intimidated into not homeschooling, because they think, oh, I don't have time to sit and teach my child all day. It's not all day.
No.
There have been studies on how much actual learning time happens in a public school, and it's only a couple of hours out of the entire time they're there. By the time they walk the hall to the next class, or they take the 10-minute break, and then they go to lunch, and then they go outside and play at recess, and by the time they do all of that, they're learning for about 2.5 hours a day. So when you only have one child to teach, and you're teaching them a subject they're interested in and in a way that they like to learn it, it doesn't take 6 hours. Yeah. We almost never are, quote unquote, in the classroom for more than 2 hours a day. We still learn. There's still plenty of opportunities. There's podcasts, there's videos. He loves to just ask questions. He's super curious. So he'll find a topic that somebody knows something about and just pick their brain. That's learning.
Yeah.
So, so all of that counts.
It is. And I think that when we as homeschoolers are looking at our child and trying to make sure that they get a great education, to me, one of the underlying foundational pieces is making sure that they learn how to love learning, making sure that they don't have the mindset of, the only way to learn is to sit down and have somebody feed it to you. That's one way, but you also have the power within you to pursue your interests, to read, to look stuff up, to find an expert and pick their brain, and it's funny you mentioned gem shows, because I still have not been to a gem show. It doesn't look like it, but right. I know. I think I'm going to get myself into a lot of trouble if I go to a gem show, so restraint. But I have met geologists online, and I will go to their shows that they do live, because the whole time they're like, and then this mine was opened in this year, and this is why they call it this, and this is how they found this, and then they found this. And it's so fascinating to listen to somebody who loves their work talk about it. And I think that that's what inspires me, right? This experience with adults who got to follow their passion and find a job that they absolutely love. I'm watching a court case, gavel to gavel, with a lawyer who streams live on YouTube. We're like right at the end, right? I I am a couple days behind. So yesterday I watched one of the expert testimonies, and this man, his job required him to build a cannon to reconstruct this supposed scenario that happened in this crime that the trial is about. So he had to build a cannon to shoot drink glasses at a taillight at 40 miles an hour. And even the attorney was like, okay, so you built a cannon. He's like, yes, sir. He goes, that's a cool job. He's like, I know, it's awesome. It's just this like moment of informal like giddiness from these grown men in court. Like you don't get to see that a ton, but when you do, it's amazing. And I know that there are teachers who feel that way about teaching, right? And they are the ones that are so creative. When I did first grade, I always would kind of gauge the classroom the way I gauge my kids now, my children, my biological children. I always called my students my kids too, so the language gets funny. But when you've got, antsy, restless kids, go outside. We would do science outside. We would go do writing in the quad. We would go do a little field trip and gather whatever. We did like an I Spy version so that we could come back to the classroom and tell everybody what we saw, and then we could do the work that we needed to do. We read like the BFG, and then we did a party where we had snozcumbers, and I forget the drink. Oh, there was a name of this bubbly drink that they drank. And then snozcumbers were these horrible, terrible vegetables, and he ate them because he wouldn't eat children's. And it was just this. So I brought these big cucumbers. Some of these kids had never had a cucumber before, and they were terrified because in the book they taste and smell terrible. So they're like, wait, that tastes good. So we have these cucumbers, and we're literally snapping them and handing kid a half of a cucumber, and they're going to town. And like I remember that. And that was 11 years ago. Those kind of experiences, I think, one, to be clear, not every day needs to look like that either. Right? Like, I don't want you as a homeschool parent to be like, well, if I don't wake up and have this big grand adventure planned every day. No. Real life, real people. But you have the opportunity, and it will present itself. I don't know. Things just unfold because you're living life together. And when you sit down and you really evaluate, what kind of schooling did my kid do today? There's so much to it. Yesterday, we did some community service, and we were able to go in the afternoon and help somebody who had these huge, these big cherry trees. And so if you don't spray your cherries, they get these little worms in them. And there's this life cycle of the worm. And so if the theory is if you can get all of the cherries off the tree and they don't fall into the ground to burrow in to hatch and all, become the next generation, you can stop that cycle. So she called in 20 families for help over the course of a couple days to do this. And we were a part of that. And I think that what is so interesting to me is that they would never have thought like, oh, I want to go clear somebody's cherry tree. Like that wasn't child-led per se, right? But what happens is as the homeschool teacher, I'm like, hey, today for school, we're doing community service. So we go to the location, and then each of them was able to find their own way to help. My oldest really, really super doesn't love bugs. He's gotten way infinitely better. We had 2 years of like full-on phobia, panic attack level with bugs. And because of YouTube and, high definition 4D, Ants Canada is the channel, he would like do documentary style videos on ants. And in the beginning, it was so uncomfortable, but it was also so fascinating. And you can only hear the guy's voice, and he sounds fairly young. And he's, again, that just infectious excitement. My son would tolerate the discomfort, and he would watch these videos, and he'd ask to watch another one, and he would face this fear in this head-on way until he was able to regulate. There's also a group called All Bugs Go to Kevin, which was so helpful to learn about these different spider species and why they're not actually a threat and what they do in the ecosystem, And so even though somebody might not count that as school per se, he learned so much, one, about bugs, but too about himself. And so he knows kind of his limits. When he found out these cherries have worms in them, he's like, I would like to not touch them. But that didn't mean that he just went away. He held the bag so we could throw the rotten cherries in it. He then found out that he has more freaking stamina than I do, and he would hold the branches down with all of his body strength so that I could do the picking. And he ended up climbing up in the tree to push it. Like, he did so much that was of his own volition, that was his idea. And he was able to contribute to his community, to my friends, to, you know, this group of people where he initially, his first kind of assessment is basically like, I don't belong here. Like, I don't care about cherries. I don't care about bugs. I don't want to do this. But he found his way to get in there and really contribute. And I just thought that was such a cool thing to witness, because there was a trust that I had in him, and my other kids too. They helped too in their own little ways, and big ways. I don't mean to diminish it, but I just told them, I was like, this is what we're here to do. Find a thing to do, you know? And so it was so fun, honestly, to watch them really dive in. And that's something that I don't know that could necessarily be replicated. The community service aspect is really important to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And those day-to-day like life skills, right? Like we built a composting 3-section bin, my son and I. This was like 3 years ago, a homeschool project that we did. He's building stuff. He's using power tools. Like I'm teaching how to measure, and we installed a sip water, a filtered water faucet on our kitchen sink, so we would have filtered drinking water. That was a project Roman and I did like 2 years ago, homeschooling. So he's learning basic home ownership life skills you're going to need. And the thing I love about that is these are things that, because they've really taken, like a lot of schools don't have like home ec type things anymore, right? So those skills, like I didn't realize some of it until like my 24-year-olds. This was a few years ago that this happened, but they came and they're like, they had to start paying some bills. They own cars, and so they had to make whatever car payments or get something fixed or mail in their insurance payment or whatever. They didn't know how to address an envelope. And I was like, it never occurred to me, because I learned how to do that in elementary school. Well, they don't teach that anymore. I won't tell you how many years ago I went to elementary school, but it was a long time ago. And they taught life skills back then, and they don't do that now. So it was just like, oh, I've got to teach my kids how to do this stuff, because the school is not teaching them that. But the thing that's coming to mind is that saying that it's like, we're all geniuses, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will think it's stupid or something like that.
Its whole life thinking that it's an idiot or it's dumb.
Yeah. And so when you have these neurodivergent kids who don't thrive and don't quote unquote do well at sitting at a desk and learning in that way, they don't realize the skills. Your son can climb a tree. He's got balance. He's got that, that physical capability to do something. And he's like critically thinking and like creatively thinking, how can we, do this? That's a skill. Yeah. And it's something he can feel good about, because he was the one that was able to do that thing. I couldn't climb a tree like that probably. Right. So, yes, I'm older than you. I've lived a lot longer. I know a lot of things, but I can't do that, and you can. And so, like, giving them that.
That brings to mind the reason I care about community is because there is this missing piece in so many of our lives where every person actually does have value. The older people, whatever that means, they're not slow and disconnected. Like, they have value to give you, right? The younger people aren't, reckless and stupid. They have value. And when you bring that group together and it's all mixed ages, you get to see, my 4-year-old, she loves babies. Loves babies. If this child had her way, I would have 100 babies. It's not happening. Sorry, kiddo. But she's like, there's a toddler. I'll watch the toddler. And she's so clever in her ways of, oh, I don't want him to go by the street, but I'm not going to like try to grab him or yell at him. I'm going to come over here with the ball and be like, hey, come play ball. And she tells me, she's like, Mommy, I got him away from the street. I'm like, that was really helpful. That was really thoughtful. 4 years old, almost 5. But like the mindfulness that takes that she's learned from watching the other moms in this community. And she is seen as valuable. I got a picture of her sitting with the same toddler. And it was like, oh, he was having a hard time because he's a toddler. He doesn't want to learn whatever we're learning. And so he went outside, and this is a different day. So this is a different situation. And that's fine. They're allowed to do that. That's part of learning, is also like learning your body and being like, I can't sit here right now. I need to go take a break. Even little tiny people. So she followed him to make sure he was safe. And she like had him sitting at the little desk and was like sitting next to him, and they're kicking their feet and talking to each other. And just the sense of purpose that they can find in the jobs that matter to them, and that's something that I think is so fascinating when you bring together community, when we get to see the ways that different people engage and the ways that different people solve problems and the way they communicate and the ideas that they have. And we've become so isolated in our little boxes, and we miss some of that, And so for a 10-year-old to be able to do something that a 40-year-old can't do, there's a little bit of like, that's kind of cool, Like there's a sense of like, hey, I can do something too. And it lessens the need to be on the defense. So it's like, oh, okay, well, adult, like, what can you tell me? And it is also really fascinating. I think you've seen this too, how I can say something, but because it's coming from mom, there's like a barrier. And then somebody else can say something and they're like, what? Tell me more. And I'm just like, this is why I love community. Because my friend Brittany, she is the queen of like positive mindset, not like fake positive, but like genuinely like, yeah, this circumstance sucks. Where can you find your way through it? Like, how can you can succumb to it and you can be miserable, and you can choose that. That's fine. But you could also choose to see something that you could grow in or whatever. Like, she's just really good at that stuff. Yeah. And my son does not want to hear it from me. It sounds invalidating or whatever. He doesn't want to hear it. But when she comes along and says things, he's just laps it up. I'm like, I'm so grateful for you. Like, we need each other. And we're not supposed to do this all alone. We're also, like you said, not supposed to do this for 6 hours a day. When you talk about your kids going through public school and not learning how to address an envelope, like, okay, fair enough. Parents are supposed to teach stuff too. But like, also, if we learned it in school, we don't necessarily know the school's not teaching it anymore. So that becomes a little bit of this kind of finger pointing thing. But when you're homeschooling, these kind of gaps, if you will, they appear, and then you can just address it right then. Yeah. Like, it's like, oh, you don't know that? Sure. Well, let me teach you how that works. That was part of our reading curriculum, which like I thought at the time was a kind of weird place to put it. But like, I guess that makes as much sense as anything, and honestly, my boys probably don't remember it because they don't care. My daughter, again, 4 years old, is obsessed with writing notes to people. And so she probably could teach them, right, despite their age gaps, how to do it because it matters to her deeply. Like, every week she sends letters to people. Yeah. I'm pretty sure we keep our post office in business the way that she makes letters and sends them to people. Every time we go somewhere, she's like, can you buy me more cards? She has one left in here. She has 2 envelopes and 1 card left because she just loves it. And that is learning. She's practicing her writing. She's practicing her spelling. She's practicing communication. She's learning that you can write and communicate. You can write to communicate, which is kind of obvious, but it actually isn't for little kids. It's like, why are you guys all sitting there with stupid things in your hands? Like, that hurts my hand. For very little kids. She's also realizing that communication can be done in pictures. Communication can just be a sense and a heartfelt feeling of like, I was thinking about you. It doesn't have to be some long drawn out thing, but then it also could be. And I think that there's so much value in that you can't force. My boys hated writing, hated it, which is heartbreaking as an author, just so y'all know. Okay. Like just because you love something does not mean your kids will. And what has been so interesting in following their interests is that my son went into D&D last year, loved D&D, obsessed with D&D, greatest game ever. I'm like, cool, because it helped him build social skills. It helped him build frustration tolerance. If you roll a bad roll, oh well, guess that sucks, right? And that's a hard thing for kids to be in a game setting and like losing or feeling, wounded or whatever the context of the game is. They did a literal class that we drove them to and dropped them off. At the end of it, it ended the very end of May. The teacher gave our family this like almost like a textbook on D&D. It was like it's a big book. It's over there, but I don't think I want to walk over and get it. And it's all of the background, all of the lore, all of the characters, everything that you could need to know. My son spent weeks studying this book. You know what he's doing? He's writing a fan fiction story about D&D and characters that he wanted to write about and the story that he wanted to write about. So this
That's
kid,
amazing.
who I could not get to address an envelope without like rage, is on chapter 2 of his own volition because he found his path to it. And it's the most incredible part of homeschooling to me has been for me to watch them find their path to the things that I think they need to know. It's like, I'm not going to let go of writing completely. Personally, I don't feel good about that. I'm not going to be like, sure, writing's a little bit tough, so you just never have to write anything. I don't love that. I did a lot of scribing. I did a lot of doing a part of it and letting them finish or letting them start and finish for them. We did a lot of scaffolding.
Yeah.
But there was always writing is valuable and writing is important. And I'll sit down and write right in front of you so you can see that I do it too.
Yeah.
And then when that opportunity presented itself for his heart to feel aligned, he had had enough experiences of watching people write and writing little bits at a time to go, yeah, I'll do it. Now, granted, the way he feels about writing, he still will write like 1 or 2 sentences, 3 sentences max a day. I'm cool with that. That's sometimes how authors write.
Right.
Make no mistake about it. If this kid sits down and writes a chapter book, I don't care if he is 10, he's an author.
Absolutely. And that's so amazing. You know what's really interesting? My husband struggled in elementary school with reading, and Dungeons and Dragons is what got him reading.
Isn't that amazing? And that has happened with both of my kids. There was like they were like reading in, like I want to learn, but it's hard, and that frustration period. And then something sparked it. It was Captain Underpants for my oldest. Well, it was a little bit of 2 things. It was comics, Garfield comics. Obsessed. We can get him from our library, like a book with probably 200 comic strips in it. And he would just devour those. He loved those. And then Captain Underpants was his first experience of reading just like stupid humor, just absolutely ridiculous, hilarious stuff. And I could hear him in there reading and just laughing to himself, like putting his face in the pillow, laughing so hard because it's late at night. And that was his takeoff point. And then my middle struggled way more with reading. Really just had the hardest time holding it, like remembering, like you were talking about, what he had learned and then applying it forward and making connections. The whole process of learning to read was the hardest thing for him. But he wanted it so badly. Like he wanted to be able to read because he's watching his brother read. He's watching his parents read. And it was very important for us to include lots of read alouds because his comprehension was great. And audiobooks so that he felt like he could access reading as a component of his life until his own skills caught up. But there's a young man, maybe boy, I'm not sure his age, who wrote fan fiction of Minecraft called Dave the Villager. And he publishes these books 5 at a time. So book 1 is like this thick because it has books 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in it. And this child was like, I'm reading that. And he struggle bust his way through book 1 and maybe even book 2. But by book 3 or 4, he was like getting his groove.
Mhm.
And his brain just was like, this is my path. This is my way to make this all make sense. And it took him, I would guess, 2 months to read the first 5 books. It was a thick book. The second one he read in probably 3 weeks of 5 more books. So 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Wow.
And then the third one of 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 was probably 2 weeks. Like he's getting
Wow.
faster and faster
Yeah.
because he loves it.
Right.
And that love of learning, that is my goal.
Yes.
Everybody's going to have gaps. Everybody's not going to remember every single fact that they ever learn. But if you love learning, you can never be stopped from learning.
Yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that kind of leads into one other piece that I think is important if people are considering starting homeschooling, if your child is already in public school, and you're thinking about switching to homeschooling. First of all, big question I've gotten in the past is, well, when do I start? Do I have to wait till the end of the school year? Do I wait till the after Christmas break? No, you can pull your child any given Tuesday you want. The day you decide you want to homeschool, that's the day you can pull them. You don't have to wait till the end of any marking period or school year or anything like that. You can start today. But one thing I recommend is that you spend a period of time deschooling. And deschooling is unlearning that learning has to be done a certain way, the way it's done in public school. That in order to be successful in school, that you need to be completing lesson plans, checking off every box, just spending 30 minutes on each subject every day, doing worksheets or all of that. That is not necessarily true. Now, some kids like it. Some kids like
Mhm.
a worksheet. And Roman goes through periods where he's like, I want to go back to a little more formal.
Mhm.
We'll go super unschooly for a while, let him pick, very child led. And then he'll be like, I feel like I need more like worksheets to work on
Mhm.
this. Great. Then we'll do that. But there will be a period of time that you both need to deschool yourselves from thinking it has to be done this way. I have to make sure my child is keeping up with their peers in every academic area. That's a made up system by the public schools because they have to. Because when you have
Yeah.
thousands of kids in a building, you need some way to structure it.
Yeah.
You can't have 25 kids in a classroom and go, everybody do what you want. Like I get
Yeah.
like you can't do. So they need structure because it's an institution. Your home is not an institution, nor should it look like one. And so you both might need to unlearn, especially if you went through public school like I did. Like, this is how school is done, right? And so we both had to unlearn that and give ourselves that freedom to relax from all of those demands, especially with a PDA kid. Demands are not a good thing for him. We need to get that out of there. And so what we did was we will go through periods of just very child led. I got him a series of books called Great Battles for Boys because he loves history. He loves learning about wars and
Mhm.
what different countries were doing. So, Great Battles for Boys is going through the world history of major wars, in a version that a kid around 8 to 12 years old can easily read, right? And he loves it. He's constantly walking around with one of those. I don't have to ask him to read those books. And so you could do something like that when you bring your child home. If you want to feel like they're still learning something while you're letting everybody decompress, have some books of something they're interested
Yeah.
in, because they're going to be learning about that thing and they're going to be reading, which
Mhm.
is learning. Like,
Yep.
reading is an important skill. And so they're learning vocabulary through that. And just so many, and they're learning how to entertain their brain. Sometimes reading can really entertain your brain.
Right.
Um, so, but to take the pressure off, there's not especially if you don't live in New York State and you're not as regimented as we need to be. Like, take that time and like let your family decompress from all those expectations and all those institutionalized ideas of what school is supposed to be,
Yeah.
and let them just explore their interests, because when they do, they're automatically learning something as they explore it.
Yeah.
They're learning it could be anything from learning how to budget your time, to learning how to write a story, to learning how to, so they're probably using some math in kind of everyday life.
Yeah.
Um,
Any
you know,
cooking you do involves math of some kind. You're having
yeah.
have to set the timer. You have to do this section and then this section, you know. I think that I do think that we get very stuck on what learning counts. And I think
Mhm.
the more you can broaden that perspective, the more you can relax. Because,
Mhm.
you know, I was on a hike recently and I was with another person and I said, we're looking at this map. And I was like, well, when the lines are closer together on a topography map, that means it's steeper. She's like, I didn't know that. Right. So here we have this great kind of depiction of the fact that, like, even as adults, one, we don't know everything, and two, we're still always learning and we know
Mhm.
different things, which means we help each other. She was talking about like cerebral spinal fluid. She's a very, very educated person. She hasn't done maps yet, you know, or in that way or whatever. And so, like, I love when that happens, when somebody can teach me something just kind of on the fly. And
Mhm.
my kids love that. And they can teach me stuff. You know, when we didn't do a whole lot of deschooling because they never really did a whole lot of public schooling.
Right.
But what has happened even in our family is because of certain subjects being really challenging, such as reading for one of them, there was like, okay, we have a curriculum we love and we do move through it. It's an OG curriculum, which is really good for dyslexia. And it's worked for all of my kids. So, like, I do keep my reading curriculum the same. However, with watching the child in front of me, oh, and I cannot hold all the rules in my brain all at once. There's a lot of rules in English. So I feel much more comfortable having something that I know is going to at least touch all of the rules. And every time I go through it, I'm like, oh, right. And then I start to remember them more. So I'm going through reading curriculum at least 3 times. Things I never even thought of, things I didn't even realize. And I think that's really, really, really fascinating. But for him, he would get to a point where he was just so, like, overwhelmed that we'd just stop. And we would
Mhm.
take sometimes a month off of formal curriculum and just read. A couple of the times, one of the times we went through The Cat in the Hat, and we would do 1 page a day. The decoding effort that this child put into a page of The Cat in the Hat was so hard for him, but he was so excited because when you've got a book that's this thick, you can see you're moving through it, right?
Mhm.
Versus
Yeah.
curriculum where you feel like this is endless and never gonna. And we would finish the book. We did Cat in the Hat once. We did a little Halloween book once, just whatever he chose. And then after that, we'd go back to the curriculum and he was better. That time off of the regimented step one, step two, actually allowed his brain to integrate. And so the way he learns, he like builds up and then he needs like decompression time to integrate.
Mhm.
And then he builds up and then he needs decompression time to integrate. And so we've built those into our systems. We don't take summers off because the transition of stopping all school and then starting up again is just sounds nightmarish for the types of brains they have. But
Yeah.
what we do is build in these little breaking points where I can tell they have been gathering and gathering and gathering, and they just need decompression time, like emotionally, but integration time intellectually. And it is so valuable to them. And during those periods of time, we do read alouds, we cook together, we play games together, we watch videos on YouTube together, we go on outdoor adventures together, and there's so much learning. It just
Mhm.
from the curriculum. Now with math, we've switched curriculums 4 times. And right now, my 3 children are all on 3 different curriculums. So my oldest, it's interesting you mentioned that Roman does this. He went from I'm sick of doing these worksheets, um, which he had chosen literally in a Rainbow Resources book. Like he was like, I want those. Great. Got sick of them. But he really, really wants to be able to check boxes and know he's making, like, have proof he's making progress, which is so
Mhm.
interesting.
Mhm.
So he does Khan Academy and he is moving through and he'll tell me, he's like, well, if I get, this many right, then I move from from learning to proficient. And then if I get this many right, then I move to mastery. And he's like telling me about his process that he's developed with this online curriculum. And he gets super, super frustrated sometimes. But then that's when I get to come in and be that mentor for him and help him to recognize, one, you're not supposed to know this. The first part of learning something is not knowing it. So you're doing it right. And then explaining it a different way, or explaining maybe what they're asking for. Or one time I completely got it wrong. And then we got to laugh at how it tricked even me, you know? And so I think that curriculum is working so well for him right now. And it's very, like, the pace is set by him. There are days when he's having a hard day and he will answer 4 questions. It's like a little segment of the chapter, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Can that be enough? And I was like, yeah, like, you get to decide. There's other days he'll do an entire unit. He'll do like 12 lessons. Great. That's real life.
Yeah.
That's real life. There are days when I can write, I can record a podcast and I can write an article for my website and I can do some client calls and I am on it. And there's other days where I'm like, I can answer an email.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm done. And I think that, sure, not everybody has that much flexibility, but right now they do. So let's use that to our advantage.
Yeah. And it can be any time of day. Like, that's the other thing too, because I've gotten that question from people, which, well, how do you fit this into your schedule? I work, you can do it whenever. After dinner, you don't have to teach every single subject, like formally teach every single subject every single day. You can say, after dinner, we're going to do some reading, and then we're going to work on, dividing fractions for a few minutes. And that might be 15 minutes that we work on it. We work on it. He's got it. Once he sees he did a problem, he's got it. We're good. So you could do, what I do is I set up like a menu on the refrigerator, and it's like, okay, you're going to read something every day for about 30 minutes or so. Read. And he likes his Great Battles for Boys, or he does have like Dog Man, or things like that. Great. And then I'll say, here's our 4 core subjects. So I've got like history, science, reading, math, right? And I'll give him 3 or 4 possible options that he could do within that frame. So I will say to him, I want you to pick 2 of these that you're going to work on at some point today. And so now, again, my child is in 9th grade. If you have like a 3rd grader, you're going to need to do it with them. Probably they're not going to be as self-led
right
with everything. But you can say, well, what would you rather do? Would you rather read this book, or would you rather write some spelling words, or would you so you can let them kind of pick and choose by their mood. Am I in the mood to write? Am I in the mood to read? Am I in the mood to watch a video about something? Am I in the mood to go outside? And my son's in Boy Scouts. This is also a great learning. It's educational. He's catching fish in our pond, and he's going to cook one. He has to, because he wants to get his fishing badge. So a learning thing that he's doing is catching the fish, baiting the hook, doing all that, filleting a fish, which I've only done a couple times. So my next door neighbor is better at it than me. And so here we are with being a community. And my next door neighbor, Jay, has said he would help Roman fillet a fish and cook it up. So that's learning. That's science. That's geology. That's
ecology, zoology,
all those things. So that counts. There's science right there. So you can give them that freedom to kind of pick and choose those style, what their body feels like doing. Because the thing about institutionalized school is you don't get to pick and choose, and so then we learn to feel like, well, if I'm not doing this, then I'm not, that's not going to count. It counts.
And it works better than you would think. And I think that's the thing that I have to keep coming back to and remembering, because of my training, that it's okay to take that break. It's okay to, for reading curriculum to be a Halloween book for a month, and I cannot tell you the joy. I don't think I have to tell you, because I think of watching them just love something that they've worked so hard for. And that experience that, I think every teacher at heart, like, waits for that moment, that like light bulb. Oh my gosh, they got it. Like, yes, like we're as teachers just as excited as they are. Like there's no there's no separation.
Yeah.
But to watch that happen and to watch them apply that to more and more things as they get older and they take over more and more of their education. And
Yeah.
it's just really incredible. I think that it's there's definitely some things that are easier being in Idaho because there's no rules. But I do think that it's still on us to make sure that we are educating ourselves and being part of a community that has experience and meeting our kids' needs where they're at, and making sure that they have goals that we're helping them to move towards. Because I if when a little kid in particular, let's see, middle-aged kid, they want to learn things, right?
Mhm.
My son, okay, so remember I said how he hated writing, and so I would scribe for him.
Yeah.
I did this one day, because my husband had it in his head all of a sudden that they need to be able to write essays. I'm like, he's 10, but okay. He's certainly not going to be able to write an essay. That's not going to happen. But I was curious what that would even look like. So I used our whiteboard and I drew like the brain mapping stuff that I had used in teaching. And I was like, so in the middle, you'll put your main idea and then you'll use little kind of branches and you'll brainstorm subjects that you would then want to talk about within this main idea. So we did that together. And then I drew the tree where we put the main idea and then the 3 points we're going to talk about. And then under those, you kind of put 3 more points. And so my thought is this one tree is going to become one essay. As he's talking, he ends up turning one branch into this whole entire essay about the educational benefits of Minecraft, how he has learned to problem solve, how he has learned to deal with like frustration and disappointment and had to practice emotional regulation because of it, how he has learned about different elements. The game has diamonds and emeralds and different stuff like that. It was so good. And he's just going and he's talking and I'm writing as fast as I can. And like, by the end of it, like my hand hurt. You could see my handwriting's getting all sloppy, but it was a great essay with like
Yeah.
beautiful examples. And here's the thing, the kid's got the ideas. He even has the
Right.
structure. Just because his hand doesn't move like this as fast as mine doesn't mean that he has to be prevented from expressing his ideas. Yes, he'll keep practicing writing, but this is part of it too. And it was
Mhm.
so intriguing to see his perspective. And I keep meaning to have him type it up, but now he's writing this story. So we've kind of like veered off. But I want to publish it on my website for parents to read. Like, this is the perspective of a 10-year-old child on what he has personally gained from playing this video game.
Mhm.
And he does a really good job of explaining it. And I think that if we take the time to sit in the fear and the discomfort, the evidence starts presenting itself in so many cases where it's like, actually, this child is thinking about what they're learning. They are reaching towards their goals. They are making progress. And as you then saw with the state testing, they're actually doing really well. We have a tendency to see the areas that we still need work in. That's just how our brains work. And that's great.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
giving ourselves that moment to really go, this is working. They're doing great
Mhm.
here. And noticing those areas where they are just really taking off. I think that
Yeah.
that's incredibly valuable too.
It is, and I gotta tell you, especially because I don't want to, gloss over the fact that, uh, homeschooling a neurodivergent child is going to have challenges.
Yes.
It's 100% worth it. It is 100% the right fit. He is learning, like I said, when I pulled him home, he was in 5th grade reading at a 1st grade level. He is now reading at about grade level or maybe slightly below, so maybe like 8th grade. And um his comprehension is higher than his vocabulary skills, but he's caught up massively because we get to pick and choose what he reads about. He gets to read about things he enjoys. He gets to have somebody scribe for him or read to him. So the learning is happening, even if he's not physically doing every single piece of it. But because it's topics that he's actually interested in, he wants to do them more. That being said, I don't want to gloss over that there will be days that are challenging, but some of it is kind of letting go of the expectation that it needs to be like, we need to complete this unit and they need to get an A, or else I'm a bad teacher, or they're not learning enough and they're going to fail at life. I got to tell you, none of my children are super academic. None of them are. And when my oldest was in middle school, he was in 8th grade and the twins were in 6th, and I was worried about my oldest and one of my twins. They were struggling, falling behind in a few subjects, and I was getting them tested, and I had to pay for the testing myself because the school district was saying, oh, they're average, they're fine, they're getting C's or whatever, so they're fine. And I didn't feel like they were fine. I could see a shift. I knew that something was up. And I was right, something was up. It still wasn't enough for the district to do a whole lot about it. But what one of the guidance counselors said to me at the time was, you don't need to worry about Jacob. This is my oldest. This kid has his crap together. Like, he knows what he's doing. He knows what he wants to be. He is a hard worker. He got a job as soon as he could get one, was paying for his own cell phone, bought his own truck at the age of 16. And that was an impressive thing because he found the truck on like Craigslist or something, because Facebook Marketplace didn't exist then. And I drove him, and I stood back. He looked over the truck. He negotiated the price down with an adult human who was he was 16. Like, it was crazy. So the school knew this kid is not gonna be like,
this is not an at-risk child.
Right. But he is going to be fine. Someone's going to work for him and they're going to do the writing that he doesn't like to do. Like, don't worry about this kid. And they were right. At 26, he is light years ahead of his peers as far as adulting and being successful and all of that. So just getting an A on a paper because it shows that you learned this topic isn't the deciding factor in whether your child is going to thrive as an adult. So yeah. Don't put that burden on yourself and on your child because it's unnecessary. Mm-hmm. Look for those opportunities of learning in everyday life. And if your child shows an interest in something, help them follow that down that rabbit hole and let them explore that topic. And you're going to see they're going to be so knowledgeable, and they're going to know how to learn. So they're going to know how, when they get interested, when they get a little older, they're going to know how to find the information themselves. My son, was balking using the dictionary, hated the dictionary with a passion. The other day I come home and he's like, I really am starting to like the dictionary, Mom. It's really helpful. And I looked up a subject and I looked something up in there that I really want to learn more about. And I was like, wow. Okay.
Speechless.
I mean, it's so great because when it's something, he knows the dictionary's there. He might have balked at using it and hated it, but he knew it was there. So when he wanted to find out something, he knew where to go and get it. Mm-hmm. And that is showing a love of learning. He's curious. He wants to learn, right? So so that was a super satisfying moment for me.
Absolutely. I love it. I love these moments, and I love getting to really, really witness my kids learning and education. I think that it's such a gift to, and there's hard days. There's really exhausting days. And because I'm here every day, that might mean I need to take a break. That might mean that I need to call it quits for today because it just ain't happening today. That might mean I need to switch it up and be like, okay, so we're going to close the computer because you're enraged, and we're going to go outside, and we're just going to stay outside until our whole bodies and nervous systems regulate. And that's part of it too. Like, they're learning the subjects, but they're also learning themselves. They're learning about their nervous
Mhm.
systems. They're learning about their brains and how their brains work and don't work, you know? And so
Yeah.
they're learning now so young strategies to work within the brain types that they have. And it's things I didn't learn until I was 30 that I wish I had known earlier. So that's a part of it too. And I think that when I need to step away or I need to go have dinner with a friend and kind of decompress, even that is part of learning, that self-advocacy, the boundaries, the noticing when your nervous system is like about to tip over the edge and doing something else instead. All of that is part of their education, their life education. Like, are they going to go into psychology and be a therapist and need these exact skills? No, that's not the point. The point is you're a human living a human experience, and it's tough sometimes. So now,
Mhm.
instead of floundering and feeling like you've got no clue, you have intentionally spent time learning how your brain works, how your brain handles conflict, how your brain handles challenges, and what supports and scaffolding you need when you approach something new and difficult, so that you can still sit in that place and move through it. And I think that's
Mhm.
invaluable, uh, much more so than whether or not they aced geometry,
Mhm.
you know? So,
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and that's something that, especially as a homeschool mom, so I am with my child pretty much all the time,
mhm,
and so yeah, taking care of myself is showing him it's okay to take care of yourself, and this is something that I've been, it's something that I've made a focus of my parenting style is because I'm raising young men. Um, it was really important for me that they understood that moms and wives get to take care of themselves and put themselves
yes,
on the priority list. Like, it's been something I wanted my boys to know that someday when you are married or, uh, have a partner, it's okay for them to take a break.
mhm,
And they're not, they deserve that downtime and they get to take that for themselves. They get to prioritize themselves. Because I watched women in my life when I was a kid, um, burning themselves out at both
mhm,
ends, like trying to, do all the responsibilities of a parent, of a mom specifically. And so if you add homeschooling to that list, you could really put yourself in a state. So it is important to make sure that not only for your own well-being, but for your child to see it's okay to admit we need a break. We need downtime and we get to take care of our own needs. Like, my family knows I work out every morning. Like, I do take a rest day here and there. But like, they know, don't interrupt me. I'm working out unless the house is burning down. Everything can wait till I get that hour that I get to, because my gym's in my house, so it's not like
mhm.
I'm leaving, and so they can come find me at any time. But they understand mom's going to get her workout in, and then we can ask her to take us to the park or to or help us with this project or whatever. But that's her time, and I don't let that get interrupted. I tell them, okay, I'm almost done. My workout has 20 more minutes and then I'll, take care of whatever that is. You're allowed to do that too, so,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
And I think, it's different for everybody. And I do know that sometimes people, they feel a certain way hearing that. They're like, I love being with my kids. That's awesome. I love being with my kids too. And every situation is different. I usually hear that from really, really young kids. Um, and I think that everybody has sort of their niche. Like, if you're like a young kid person and you love the like mess and the chaos and the splashing in the puddles and that like brings you so much joy, that's rad. Do that. Like, you don't have to feel bad that your break doesn't look like mine. Like, I might need to go like read a book or go, like I said, go out to dinner with my friend. Maybe that's not what you need. Maybe literally what you need is to go splash in puddles, and that happens to be super aligned with your toddlers right now. But as things change and as your family grows, just keep touching in with yourself and making sure, like, am I still getting what I need too? because like you said, like I'm on the priority list. And the better I take care of myself, the better I can show up for my family. And things change, seasons change, kids evolve, you evolve. Like it's never going to be identical from year to year. And that's absolutely fine. But yeah, I saw a lot of the sort of martyrdom as well. And I don't think that that's required. You know, there is a mindfulness about choosing a certain lifestyle and choosing, you know, the hard comes with the good, right? Like, and we can still take care of ourselves within that. So I think that's a really important piece. And I hope that people that are homeschooling hear that and know that they're important and they get to take the time that they need for themselves too. And that it does benefit their kids and they are learning something even from that. And those that are looking to homeschool, you know, take that time to de-school first, because you'll start to shift your mindset and your focus and your priorities and really hone in on the parts that are really valuable and important for your family, and let go of some of the bureaucracy or like the rigidity that maybe doesn't work for your family. So
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the great thing about homeschooling, is that it does free you up to live whatever the lifestyle is that you want to live with your family. And we travel. That's a big thing for us. We love to travel. And what I love about homeschooling is we can learn. We've done, the last time I think that I took Roman to Atlanta with me, we drove, because sometimes I fly to Atlanta, sometimes I drive it. I go to Atlanta a lot. I have family there. We listened to a podcast the whole way down called Sold a Story, which was about reading, which is
nice.
something my son struggles with. And he loved it. He was like, oh my gosh, Mom, this is what we discovered is part of the issue with reading was the method that they were using in public school, not him. It wasn't that he couldn't learn to read. There's certain methods work better than others. And so just that creativity that we're allowed to say, we're going, I mean, I've taken him out of the country. He's gone to Mexico. He's gone to Dominican Republic. And there's always something to learn there about new cultures and about the history of those places and the type of plant life that is there and the animals that are there. Like, there's so much learning to be had that can look like the lifestyle we want to live. And we don't have to be stuck to, we got to be in this classroom 5 days a week, 10 months a year, you know? So yeah.
All right. So in summary, take care of you, make it your own. Ask us questions if you have questions, because I think we both really just enjoy talking about this topic.
Yeah.
And Tracie, where can people find you if they want to ask you questions?
So I'm on Facebook, Tracie Kemmler Bieler, and Transforming with Tracie is my kind of business page on Facebook as well. I do have a website, traciebieler.com as well.
Nice.
And you can message me through there. Yeah. And Facebook Messenger works just great. So
perfect. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming and talking about this topic with me today. I am so grateful for you. I'm grateful that I get to witness your journey, and I am doing a super happy dance for Roman being done with testing and doing so well.
Me too. Me too. Thank you so much for having me. I could talk about this all day, and I just love chatting with you. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll talk to you later.
Okay, bye.